What if the same plants that kept people alive during the Black Death, the 1918 flu, and centuries of plague could still help protect your health today? Along the way, you'll hear safe, practical tips you can actually use at home, with the reminder that these are supportive traditions, not a replacement for medical care. These are not rare or exotic, they're everyday plants you may already have in your kitchen or garden. And the real question is, how did they endure history's deadliest epidemics? And what can they still offer you this fall? Let's begin with one of the most powerful survivors. Garlic earned one of history's strongest reputations as a protective measure, so much so that during the Black Death, people wore strings of it around their necks believing it could help ward off the plague. From crowded villages to royal households, this humble bulb was trusted less as food and more as a barrier against unseen illness. Doctors carried it through disease-ridden streets, while monks crushed and ate it in hopes of resisting infection. Sailors packed garlic on long voyages as a first defense against outbreaks at sea. Even centuries later, during the 1918 influenza pandemic, families returned to garlic, preparing broths and tonics when pharmacies ran short of remedies. These uses reflected belief and tradition, not proof, but the trust in garlic endured across centuries. Modern science offers some context. Garlic contains sulfur compounds like allicin that show antibacterial activity in lab studies. Clinical research has also linked garlic preparations to reduced risk of certain respiratory infections and benefits for blood pressure and cholesterol. For practical use today, fresh crushed garlic added to meals or broths continues this tradition, while aged garlic extract has been tested in supplements. If you take blood thinners or have medical conditions, check with your doctor before adding garlic supplements regularly. Garlic's long history reminds us that when communities sought protection, they often turned to plants that carried both belief and practical value. And just as garlic once stood watch in homes and monasteries, another plant was trusted to stand guard at the very edges of old villages. Elderberry was long regarded as a village guardian, with elder trees often planted at the edges of European communities as a symbol of protection. To villagers, the dark berries were more than food, they were part of the household defense against illness. Cutting down an elder tree was thought to invite misfortune, which shows just how deeply people valued its presence. When sickness spread, families gathered the berries to simmer into syrups or brew into soothing tonics. These remedies were passed down for generations, thought to ease coughs, fevers, and seasonal lung troubles. For many, a spoonful of elderberry syrup wasn't luxury but a trusted form of support. Modern studies help explain why. Laboratory and clinical research has shown elderberry extracts can reduce the duration and severity of some upper respiratory infections, including influenza, though results are mixed. Some studies demonstrate antiviral activity in lab tests, while large-scale reviews caution that elderberry is not a replacement for medical treatment. It's also important to note that raw elderberries and plant parts are toxic. Only cooked syrups or standardized third-party tested extracts are considered safe. And if you're immunocompromised or on medications, consult a physician before adding elderberry regularly. From folklore to modern research, elderberry highlights how plants once thought of as protectors can still support seasonal defense. And while it stood watch at village borders, another herb earned its place much closer to the faces of history's most famous healers. Have you ever wondered why plague doctors wore those long bird-like masks? Inside the beaks, doctors packed herbs and substances they believed would purify the air, or mask the foul smells that were thought to spread disease. Thyme was one of the most common choices, often tucked alongside sponges soaked in vinegar as these physicians moved through streets filled with sickness. But thyme wasn't limited to masks. It was burned in chambers, carried in small pouches, and steeped into infusions for people struggling with coughs and congestion. In Mediterranean communities, the herb had an older reputation as both a purifier and a friend to the lungs. Burning thyme was thought to disinfect crowded spaces, while teas and smokes were passed down as household remedies during unsettled times. Modern studies provide some insight. Thyme contains natural compounds like thymol and carvacrol, which have shown antimicrobial activity in laboratory studies, including effects against bacteria and, in some lab settings, antiviral potential. These are lab-level findings, not medical cures, but they help explain why thyme earned its long-standing place in tradition. Today, you can carry that history forward in simple ways. Add sprigs of thyme to soups, or steep a few fresh leaves in hot water for a soothing tea. Just avoid applying essential oils directly to the skin, since they're highly concentrated, and check with a doctor if you're taking medications. As thyme filled the air in sick rooms and streets, another aromatic plant was hung in great bundles overhead, trusted as both comfort and protection. Rosemary earned its reputation during plague years when families burned it or hung sprigs in hallways, believing its sharp scent could help guard the home against illness. In hospitals and homes across the Mediterranean, the rising smoke and fragrance carried both comfort and a sense of protection. What people once linked to clearing dangerous vapors now has clearer science behind it. Modern studies have identified rosmarinic acid, along with other compounds in rosemary, as powerful antioxidants. These compounds help reduce oxidative stress, protecting cells from free radical damage. In this way, what people associated with bad air centuries ago can now be understood as genuine cell-level support for the body. For everyday use, rosemary remains one of the easiest herbs to add to your diet. A sprig tucked into roasted vegetables or a light rosemary tea can deliver antioxidants without effort. But it's important to note, concentrated essential oils or high-dose extracts are not the same as culinary herbs. Older viewers especially should avoid ingesting oils or supplements without medical guidance, since safe use usually means sticking to food-level amounts. Rosemary reminds us that even in times of fear, people sought plants not only for survival, but also for resilience. And while it was trusted for the body, others turned to a very different herb for the mind. When fear weighed heavy on communities and uncertainty filled the air, people often turned to lavender for its calming presence. Its fragrance was seen not as medicine for the body, but as comfort for the mind when the world outside felt dangerous. During years of plague, lavender was used in many ways. Bundles were burned in rooms, small sachets were carried in clothing, and oils were rubbed on skin in hopes of easing tension. The idea was simple: if people could find calm, they believed their bodies might endure hardship better. Modern science shows they were noticing something real. Inhaling lavender has been shown in clinical studies to consistently reduce stress and improve sleep quality. Its effects work through the brain's emotion centers, especially the limbic system, and by interacting with GABA pathways that help the body relax. In other words, the comfort our ancestors notice now has a measurable biological explanation. For everyday use now, gentle methods are best: a diffuser set on low, a sachet near your pillow, or a few drops on a cloth for short inhalation. Never apply undiluted oil directly to skin, and check with a healthcare provider if you're pregnant, taking medications, or have respiratory conditions. While lavender soothed restless minds, other household plants were believed to fight illness in very different ways. Have you ever heard the old folklore about leaving cut onions in a room to soak up sickness? For centuries, families placed bowls of sliced onions on windowsills or near sickbeds, believing the bulbs could pull illness out of the air. It was never proven, but during plague years and influenza outbreaks, this simple act gave people a sense of protection when little else was available. Onions were deeply tied to ideas of vitality and cleansing, appearing alongside garlic in traditions from Egypt to Rome. Their strong scent and layered form made them feel like nature's sponge against invisible threats. While we now know onions cannot absorb disease from the air, the symbolism reveals how people turned to everyday foods as shields within their homes. Modern research reframes onions in a useful way. They're part of the same allium family as garlic and contain sulfur compounds and flavonoids like quercetin, which are associated with immune support and healthy circulation. Nutritionally, onions are supportive, but they don't act as airborne filters. A warm onion soup or broth remains a nourishing way to carry forward that legacy. Just be mindful, onions can cause digestive irritation for some people. And from kitchens to ancient camps, other plants carried reputations for more urgent, battlefield needs. On old battlefields, one plant that often entered the stories of soldiers and healers was yarrow, a modest-looking herb with fine white flowers. Folk history even ties its name, Achillea, to the legend of Achilles using it for wounds. While that tale belongs to tradition rather than proven fact, it reflects how strongly people associated yarrow with survival where injury was common. Beyond the battlefield, families in different cultures turned to yarrow as part of home remedies. Traditional herbal sources describe its use in poultices for cuts and teas for fevers. In villages facing sickness and shortages, people leaned on what grew nearby, and yarrow became one of those resources passed through generations. These uses are part of folk practice and not a substitute for medical treatment, but they show how important plants felt in everyday resilience. Modern studies have begun to examine yarrow more closely. Its extracts show antibacterial activity in laboratory settings and may support wound healing in animals, which offers some support for the historical reputation. Still, much more research is needed before drawing firm conclusions. If you are curious about trying yarrow today, talk with a healthcare provider or a qualified herbalist before using it on wounds or as a tea. Yarrow's story illustrates how generations turned to plants in times of struggle, preserving knowledge even without clear proof. And when we bring all these stories together, they reveal something larger about the place of these herbs in human survival. These 7 plants didn't just mark history, they stood by people when options were few. Garlic, elderberry, thyme, rosemary, lavender, onion, and yarrow were part of daily survival long before medicine explained their effects, which is why they still feel relevant today. Here's the thing, they're all still within reach. You'll pass them in kitchens, gardens, or markets without realizing the traditions that surround them. They can support well-being, but they're not substitutes for vaccines, prescriptions, or professional care. Always check with your doctor before starting extracts or supplements. Ancient survival can fit into modern life. Comment which ones you use, and subscribe for more simple tips.